So guys, good evening. I hope you are all doing well. I hope you're having a good weekend. So I watched Black Christmas 1974 the other night, well, 2 times, and it was so good. I intended that to be my next review, but I went to the cinema last night to see Songbird. I've heard a lot of bad things about the movie, but I was very intrigued by the premise, so I decided to go and see Songbird. So I will review that tonight, and I will review Black Christmas tomorrow. So the basic storyline in Songbird is it's about a courier who is trying to stop the love of his life ending up in a quarantine camp known as the Q Zone. Songbird is set in 2024 with the world fighting against COVID-23. What has happened is Coronabollocks has mutated, and then mutated some more. And each time it's mutated, it's got a new name. So COVID now lives in the air. No one is allowed outside unless they have an immunity bracelet, which is a yellow bracelet. Nico, who is played by KJ Apa, who is Archie from Riverdale, is immune, and he works as a courier. He is in a virtual relationship with Sarah, who is played by Sophia Carson. Their virtual relationship means that they cannot physically be together. Nico is immune and Sarah isn't. They met when Nico's boss mixed up the deliveries, so a very interesting twist of fate. So in this new world, everyone who is not immune cannot leave the house for any reason. They must take a test every morning, and if they test positive, they are shipped off to a special camp called the Q Zone. Sarah lives with her gran Lita, and unfortunately, early in the movie, Lita falls ill. So Lita falls ill one day, and inevitably she's going to test positive for COVID-23 the next day. So Nico has to get his hands on one more immunity bracelet before Sarah is shipped off to the Q Zone. So I think in theory the basic plot isn't too bad. So you have somebody who's allowed outside all the time in a relationship with somebody who isn't, and he fears she's going to be shipped off to this Q Zone because somebody in her household has tested positive for COVID-23. The premise isn't bad, but our issue is in this movie there's too much going on. There are far too many subplots. So we have Sarah trying to avoid deportation to this special camp. We have Nico, who is trying to acquire an immunity bracelet for Sarah. We have a second virtual relationship between YouTuber May and Michael, who is a disabled vet confined to a wheelchair. This one just felt forced and awkward, to be honest. We have Emmett, who's played by Peter Stormare, who put in a good performance. He is head of the sanitation department. They go from house to house, either shipping people to this Q Zone or sometimes assassinating them. There was even one case where he said he was going to take somebody to the Q Zone who was immune. I don't understand how that works. He said there was a reason, but we didn't really go into that. And we also have Piper Griffin, who's played by Demi Moore, and her husband William Griffin, who's played by Bradley Whitford. They run 2 illegal operations. One, they sell immunity bracelets for 150 grand, and 2, they organise illegal parties. And we also have Piper's husband, William Griffin, using his immunity to have an affair with YouTuber May. So as you can see, there is quite there's a lot going on. For me, it's a watchable film. I don't hate this movie. I don't think it's terrible, but I think it is one that's quite forgettable. I think the actors do an okay job. It's quite a good cast, but you feel that a lot of the scenes are staged. You feel a lot of the lines are cliched. You feel it's just forced. When Nico's standing and Sarah are standing other side of the door, and Nico says it's like I can feel you through the wall. Blah. And then Nico at the end, when he does his voiceover, he says, as a career, I wasn't just delivering packages, I was delivering hope. Blah. And Peter Stormare, who I thought did very well, this was a good line. This was an okay line, but it just felt it had been forced in. When he was smoking a cigarette, he said to Nico, "Do you know why I like to smoke? Because I like to feel there's something out there that can still kill me." There's a lot of things out there that can still kill you, even if coronabollocks is in the air. So I felt it was just that line reeked of being forced. There was some nice footage of LA abandoned. It felt quite post-apocalyptic. You had graffiti that said "Let us out, fight back," so it did suggest that there had been riots previous to this complete lockdown where you cannot leave your house for any reason. I think more could have been done with this premise. We didn't really get to see. We had a very short news report on the Q camp to say that the conditions weren't very nice, but we didn't get to see inside it. And the ending, how things came together, was so bad. Unless COVID-23 makes everybody blind, this ending doesn't work. And as I mentioned earlier, we just had far too many subplots for an 85-minute movie. We didn't really get to bond with the two lead characters all that much. We just had a little bit too much going on. But there's a degree of credit goes towards this movie. It was the first film to go into production, actually not after the shutdown, during the shutdown. It was filmed and edited between March and August 2020. So actors had to be tested every day. They had to be kept apart where possible, and a maximum of 40 crew members could work each day. So you definitely have to give the production team credit for making this film happen. There were shortcomings, but you have to give them credit for actually putting this movie out there under very different circumstances. I mean, was this movie made simply to cash in at a time where very few other movies are being made? The rental costs would suggest yes. The rental costs of this movie tie in with the illegal operation in this movie with the immunity bracelets. This movie does cost quite a lot to rent if you decide not to go to the cinema and watch it, so it does tie in nicely with the illegal parties and the immunity bracelets. Or was this movie possibly a warning about what can happen if a government gets drunk on power? Is this movie, it may be a little over the top, but is this movie getting towards, this is something we should be concerned about? When you have governments who have a lot of legislation and a lot of power, should we be concerned that some governments may abuse that power? So was there a sinister undertone to say that this is something that could happen despite being over the top? Was the movie getting at the idea that this is something that could happen? Now, another thing that has come up in discussion of this movie is the morality issue. Now, is it appropriate to make a COVID movie in the middle of the COVID pandemic? Now, disaster movies aren't new. We've had movies about Titanic, World War I, World War II, the Vietnam War, and Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor was actually directed by Michael Bay, who produced Songbird. When is the right time to make a movie about a disaster or an unfortunate event? In Songbird's defense, this isn't the first Corona movie. There is the movie simply called Corona, where a group of people are stuck in an elevator, and there is Corona Zombies, which is relatively self-explanatory. I do believe that more movies will be made about COVID-19, so I don't have an issue with the movie being made in the first place. And it seems that they did make it pretty safely, and they had to follow some very stringent guidelines. But I do think a lot more could have been done with this premise. The movie was quite short. I think it ran for about 85 minutes, and you were dealing with a lot of subplots. You were jumping around between different camera angles, different uses of the camera, so you jumped around from wide shots, you jumped around to handheld, to shaky cam, to security footage, and you jumped a lot. You jumped around characters a lot, so it was difficult to keep up with, but to its credit, I wasn't bored. I was not bored during this movie. I don't think I would see it again, but I never felt bored. As much as the premise was average, as much as some things weren't done very well, a lot of things were forced, mainly the dialogue, I didn't feel bored during this movie because you did want to know what was going to come next. And the budget for Songbird was in the region of $1 to $2 million. I'm not sure what it was exactly. So I think as time goes on and restrictions do loosen, there will be an opportunity for more directors to make movies about this pandemic, and that is inevitable. So I think there will be better funded movies coming along in the future that will be able to take this premise to the next level. But I credit Songbird for doing their best under difficult circumstances. I credit them for getting together quite a good cast. It just felt like it was a little bit rushed. It felt it was put together and released very quickly. Now I understand the reasons for doing that. If you are making a very specific movie like this, you want to get it out before others. You're also putting this movie out into a market that's very limited right now, so I completely understand their reasons for putting this together quickly. I would say give this a go. I don't think it'll be an all-time classic. I think by the time more similar movies have been released, Songbird will go a little further down in the pile, but I would definitely say give it a shot. Michael Bay is... his films are hit or miss, but he's a very good cinematographer, so it's not a bad movie to look at. They put it together very quickly, so in these circumstances you need somebody like Bay who can make the best of the footage available. So yeah, it was interesting, but I will do my next review will be the 1974 Black Christmas. I've been looking forward to talking about that for a while, but as I decided to see Songbird last night, I decided to put out a review on that while it was fresh in my mind. So guys, thank you for listening and have a good weekend.